Hey guys, today we're going to talk about the essential question of how do humans affect the environment. Our learning target is predict how the loss of natural resources may influence the environment. Okay? Human impacts on population, and this is still Unit 2, and this is our second and should be final video for Unit 2, so we're almost done with populations also. Okay, so most likely you know that the majority of the human impacts are negative, so we're going to go over those, but there are also some positive things that we can do too. We can't forget about that. Alright, non-native species. Those are invasive. We went over this in the last video, hopefully you remember. What you see here is a yellow-bellied slider, which is a turtle. You see its yellow belly, and a red-eared slider. Alright, here in North Carolina, yellow-bellied sliders are native, which means they have lived here the whole time. They are from here in North Carolina. Alright, red-eared sliders you can buy at the pet store. People think they're pretty, they buy them, and then they get too big for their terrariums or they stink too bad, and they release them into the wild thinking, oh, I'll give it a good home, I don't want to kill it. Well, actually that's a very negative effect on the environment because yellow-bellied sliders are then forced out of their natural habitat because of the red-eared sliders. The red-eared sliders are, again, non-native, so they are invasive. They invade on the yellow-bellied slider, and they take the food that the yellow-bellied slider eats. They take the homes of the yellow-bellied sliders, and they basically take over. They're a generalist species, which means they can live basically anywhere, whereas the yellow-bellied slider needs a certain environment. So it's definitely not good for the environment of the yellow-bellied slider for this to happen. Also, even worse, the yellow-bellied and the red-eared slider can mate, which could ruin the genetics and possibly lose yellow-bellied sliders forever. And when they make, as we see here, orange-eared sliders. Alright, so again, there are many different types. We've talked about kudzu. There are all kinds of non-native species that are brought here in North Carolina or anywhere, and they can cause major, major problems. They are bad. Just because you buy it at the pet store doesn't mean you should let it out. This is definitely a human impact. We bring things maybe by accident or on purpose because we think they're pretty, and we let them into the wild, and they really have a detrimental effect, which means bad. Okay. Next thing, deforestation. D meaning get rid of or none, and forest, obviously this. So this is a picture of what was a rainforest, beautiful place, and it has been completely and totally demolished and cut down. Every little thing has been whacked that you can see here, and that adds a lot of different things. It can add the fact that plants do photosynthesis, and so because of that, it adds more CO2 in the air because plants are able to get rid of it. I'm trying to show you here what it says. When CO2 is still added into the air, it causes things like the global warming to happen because you have more CO2 in the air. Also, you could have the loss of habitat for species that live in that environment. Alright, so everything that once lived there can't now because it's gone. Alright, and then finally, you can have flooding, which can kill aquatic systems, which are things that live in the water because of erosion. Alright, which means that because the trees and the root systems aren't there anymore, whatever is on that land can go straight into the river or streams nearby and kill the fish because you may have too much nitrogen or soil or whatever and kill that too. So deforestation is a pretty big deal. Alright, so again, when you take away the trees, you take away the ability to pull CO2 out of the air, which leads to global warming. You have your loss of habitats for everything that lives there, and forests are home to millions of species, small and large. And also, it doesn't allow plants to soak up the water with their root systems into the soil. So when it rains, it'll flood and take everything with it, eroding away soil and nutrients that get into the water and can affect the water also. So deforestation is obviously very bad. And humans do deforestation maybe to make pastures for their cows or cropland or maybe most definitely housing developments because the more people we have, the more places we have to live. Alright, next, burning fossil fuels. Alright, every time we burn fossil fuels, be it car, riding a bus, energy, every time we turn on the light, the computers, I'm burning energy, using energy right now, it leads to global warming. Honestly, global warming is an old term that I don't really like. It's really climate change now because not everything will get warm just because we put CO2 and other things into the air. But burning fossil fuels mainly leads to that, and that's what your EOC is going to say, so you need to know it will put more CO2 into the air, causing the greenhouse effect to be to work still, and will prevent that heat from releasing like it would in nature. You know, we want the greenhouse effect, but when you add more CO2, it doesn't let as much heat escape, which will then make the atmosphere hotter. All right, so burning fossil fuels leads to that. Not only that, but pollution in general. We don't want to breathe that in. We can get lung cancer, and it can hurt animals and our eyes. All right, bioaccumulation. Okay, this is one that y'all may not have ever heard before. All right, pollution. When we pollute our environment, mostly this happens with aquatic environments. That's why you see things that live in the sea or river and streams, and that's water. All right, take a look at the algae at the bottom. The algae breaks down the pollutants that go in the water first. All right, so you can see those dots right there on the bottom right. Okay, and those dots are showing you how much pollution that this algae has consumed. You can see here, it hasn't consumed that much. All right, but when the shrimp then eats that algae, because that's what they eat more than just one piece of algae, so they get a lot more of that toxin, as you can see here. Okay, but then the Arctic cod eats a lot of the shrimp, all right, because these are predators. You're moving up the food chain. So it keeps a lot more of that toxin. So now you see even more, getting to the point that's pretty dangerous, toxins in that fish. But then it's not done. You see the ringed seal eats a lot of the Arctic cod, and every Arctic cod has a lot more toxins in the shrimp or the algae, and they eat a lot of that, so they end up having a great deal of toxins. And then by the time I'm in with the polar bear, and you can see here, this is a big deal. The polar bear has a ton of toxins in there. All right, and this is called bioaccumulation. Bio being life, accumulating meaning more. As you go up the food chain, more and more of these toxins are found. They stay in the fat. All right, why does that matter to you? Well, one, because you may care about animals, you don't want anything to happen to them. But two, if you eat things, then you may actually get the toxin. For instance, mercury or lead can be eaten by shrimp and moved up all the way up to tuna. So if you eat a lot of tuna, you could have too much mercury, and you could actually have mercury poisoning from that. So make sure that you are careful with the seafood that you eat. If you eat seafood that's at the top of the food chain, you could be having bioaccumulation. You can talk to your doctors about it. It's a for real deal. So it affects not only animals, but it affects humans too. And obviously algae is a plant, so it goes all the way up. So bioaccumulation also is very bad. So we need to make sure that we don't pollute our waters. And normally that comes from factories and maybe erosion of different things that lead to the water. And that's how it would get in there to start with, that the algae would even have to break it down. So therefore pollution would be bad. Okay, so what do we do that's good? Conservation and stewardship. Conservation is how we conserve our environment. All right, so you can see right here we've got species here that we're trying. You have a land where nobody can shoot them or hunt them. That'd be like a Yellowstone National Park. All right, everywhere else you see types of farming. Farmers normally are good stewards because they need to get things from the land, and so if they are good stewards, then they can produce what they need to make money every single year. If you treat it badly, it won't be back the next year. So we conserve we can conserve lands by making it where no one can touch them, make them in national parks, or we can use land smartly and be good stewards and not overgraze or overfish or pollute. These farms you can see here, these strip farming, that helps prevent erosion. Here in the middle, maybe you don't till, which would bring the soil up to the ground. It would rip all those root systems out. Instead, you'd leave the grass there so that when it did rain, it was able to soak up the rain and not cause erosion. Here on the right, you see something that I think is really, really neat. You've got a highway, you've got cars going under the highway, on the highway, but over top of the highway is what's called an animal corridor, okay? And basically in very rural areas or areas with a lot of wildlife, you'll have these, and they're bridges for animals. And basically it helps them be able to cross the road without having to go across our road and either get killed or kill us. All right, so a lot of times you'll have a fence kind of protecting them from going down, and they'll realize real quick what's safe and what's not, and they'll actually use them. They have them a lot in Alaska too, and they also make tunnels like this so that animals that like to stay in the dark could actually cross, and you can look those up. They have pictures of owls eating rats and stuff like that underneath roads. So it's a way that we can try to coexist with animals without killing too many, and without messing up our cars too. So hopefully you've seen out of this chapter how populations are affected, and every single thing that we do could make a J or an S curve. Remember that every time we take away resources for an animal, we lower that carrying capacity that exists there, which could then really detrimentally affect that environment. All right, but hopefully you also see the good things that we can do. Obviously, don't pollute. The less we use energy-wise, and recycling can help. But here are some main reasons that people do what they do in businesses to try to protect animals and the environment. They give back to us as well. All right, thanks guys. Bye.